This is the beautiful Ironmasters Mansion at Pine Grove Furnace. These Ironmasters mansions were typically built on a hillside near the furnace, both as a practical matter so that the ironmaster, an investor, an owner, an operator of the furnace, could literally oversee what was going on, but also as a matter of social display. So we're literally at the top of the social pyramid here. This particular mansion was built in a 2-year period from the spring of 1827 to the spring of 1829 by an ironmaster named Peter Ege, or Ege, E-G-E. The Ege family were very prominent ironmasters in south central Pennsylvania, and Peter's father, Michael, had first become involved in Pine Grove Furnace in the early 1780s. He died in 1815, and Peter became the ironmaster here until the 1830s, when he went bankrupt because of an economic downturn called the Panic of 1837. This mansion is built of bricks that were manufactured right here on site using local materials, and it is a very impressive building. Let's take a quick look inside. Today, the mansion is run by the Appalachian Trail Museum Society. It's used as a hostel or overnight guest house for hikers, and also is available for rental for weddings and other special events. One of the dormitory bunk bed arrangements, as you see here, is actually in the fanciest room in the entire mansion. This was probably the fancy parlor where special guests would have been invited after they came in the front door through the foyer. And you can see that there's a beautiful marble surround, although it's now cracked, for this fireplace. And the only arches inside the building are these two beautiful sets here. We're standing inside the old kitchen in the Ironmasters Mansion at Pine Grove Furnace. A notable feature of this 1829 mansion is the very large cooking fireplace, which even for an old house like this is remarkably wide. You'll notice we have an old Peter Ege stove and an original cast pot, probably made right here at the furnace. These are the only original objects inside this mansion. As we look at the Ironmasters Mansion here, the top of the social hierarchy, it's an opportunity to also consider the very bottom of the social strata at this ironworks. Many of the early ironmasters were slaveholders, and part of the story of Pine Grove Furnace are the enslaved workers who were here. Now that predates this mansion by a number of decades, but even Peter Ege, the guy who built this mansion in 1827 to 29, was himself a slaveholder and slave manager in the early 1800s. He personally owned at least 3 slaves. Those enslaved workers were also accompanied by some indentured servants. Those would be poor, white, German or English or Irish workers who came across the Atlantic for a period of just a few years of servitude. Slavery at Pine Grove Furnace peaked in the year 1810, when just about half the workforce, 14 out of 30 workers in the core operation, were enslaved. Many of those people were leased from other slaveholders elsewhere in the county. Considering the history of enslaved workers here at Pine Grove Furnace, it's all the more interesting that just a couple generations later, Pine Grove Iron Works was a documented stop on the Underground Railroad. There were strong connections between the southwest corner of Cumberland County and northern Adams County, where both the Quaker communities and the free African American communities around Caledonia Furnace were part of the network. There's a certain mythology that has grown up that fugitives heading north stayed inside the mansion in the antebellum years. In particular, there's a story that they stayed in the basement in a secret little room. However, it doesn't make a lot of sense because this was the most prominent, visible part of the entire community. There were probably smarter places for fugitives to stay in various outbuildings and stables.